Hello, welcome to another episode of Front Row. We have today with us Dr. Geneshan Wignaraja, Executive Director of Lakshman Kadiragama Institute. Welcome to Front Row and thank you for being here with us today. So first of all, I would like to know, with your extensive research and knowledge about Asia and international trade and economy in Asia, we are in interesting times in terms of global and Asian trade. Can you let us know what are the current developments and what are the prospects of economic growth and trade growth in Asia?
So developing Asia has traditionally grown twice as fast as the world economy before the global financial crisis. And that was a watershed. So in 2008, 2009, the world changed. And today, developing Asia is growing at some 6% per year, which will taper off to 5.7% from 2019 to 2025. And that will be faster than global growth. So the question that people are asking is this tapering off of fast growth from before the crisis, the beginning of a cyclical slowdown, or is it just a blip on the horizon on the road to faster growth? Now, the way you have to think about this is in terms of the kinds of risks that we're seeing on the horizon. One big risk is the trade war between the United States and China, which seems to be escalating, and not so long ago India imposed some tariffs on the United States. So there is some sort of issues of trade tit for tat taking place, and the US seems to be worrying about countries with trade deficits with itself and believes that tariffs are the approach to try to deal with such a deficit issue. A second risk is the crisis in emerging markets, stretching from Argentina to Turkey, which has some Asian countries vulnerable to financial sector risk. So protectionism and financial sector contagion are definitely risks on the horizon and can affect both the growth outlook as well as trade. On the opportunity front, China's slowdown, which is another potential issue, can provide opportunities for latecomers. That is in industries which are labor intensive but also increasingly skill intensive, and there lies the opportunity for countries like Sri Lanka, for Vietnam, for India, for Indonesia. Do we have the price, quality and delivery in these countries to get into the value chains that China vacates as it begins to slow down and move on?
Yes, this is exactly the next question I wanted to ask. So what does this mean for Sri Lanka? That you definitely said there are, in any chaotic situation, there are both opportunities and challenges. So Asia has been the driving force behind world growth, both in trade and the economic growth. So this current developments, how would it affect a small country like Sri Lanka in the next 2 to 3 years?
So much of Sri Lanka's trade is still with the United States and Europe and is still in traditional products, tea, textiles, tourism, things of that ilk. And so that will kind of continue, but if the trade war heats up or there's a crisis in emerging markets or Brexit becomes an issue, there is some possible slowdown in those markets. Although we are, a small country and we can find space in our traditional industries. The challenge more is the other issue which could come through a slowdown in Asia. And one worries a bit about that because there are increasingly signs that we may not only have a trade set of issues which will be somewhat negative in Asia, but also a set of financial contagion risks. So we have to be vigilant. I am not particularly worried about Sri Lanka because we've managed to maintain our trade openness. Reform is happening slowly but surely. We are liberalizing our para-tariffs. We are beginning to look at exports more seriously. We are trying to do trade facilitation better, but there is of course room for improvement. So I think over time the trade side will be okay. On the question of a financial crisis, the central bank has taken steps to build the reserves of Sri Lanka.
So what you're saying is actually we have taken some steps to improve resilience of Sri Lanka to face the crisis, but there is still room to improve. On another topic which I know you are an expert on is the free trade agreements. You have, I know, studied extensively during your tenure at the ADB, especially the East Asian experience with free trade agreement. Can you shed some light onto how Sri Lanka should face the challenges that free trade agreements create and also embrace the opportunities?
So I think for a country like ours, which is a latecomer to FTAs, we only had 5 or 6 until the Singapore-Sri Lanka FTA came into effect, we should look at this very judiciously because trade capacity is a problem in Sri Lanka. We don't have trained negotiators or many trade negotiators. So it really means, I think, doing what we're doing at the moment, which is an agreement with Singapore, which exists. We're trying to negotiate with China and India. There is some discussion of agreements with, say, Bangladesh and beyond. Thailand is also under negotiation. So I think we should get those done first.
Does it, so just going back to your question about trade capacity, when you do have limited capacity, trying to negotiate, I mean, China and India itself is daunting, negotiating with these two countries. But do you feel Sri Lanka should basically manage this process better, or do you feel we still have the capacity to do multiple trade agreements in one go?
So as I have argued previously, Sri Lanka should seriously consider setting up a USTR type dedicated body to do trade negotiations. It should be staffed by a mixture of trade professionals who are trade economists, as well as trade lawyers, as well as people who are customs experts, standard experts and others. It should be at quite a high level. I would have thought it should be in the Prime Minister's office. In my own way, it should be properly resourced. We should get the best technical assistance to do this. And then we should be very selective in how we try to do trade agreements, and we should try to have a mechanism to learn from them. What we also should study very carefully is rules and regulations in foreign markets. And what are then the opportunities that our business may exploit, both in terms of trade as well as outward investment in those markets. So I think we need to do the institutional homework of setting up such a body. I also think we need to do the hard yards of training our people. And I think we need to set up this institutional arrangement in a way that's cross-cutting. One other proviso, if I might say, we probably need to do a lot of domestic stakeholder consultation on what are the areas we want to open up and what are the areas we are a bit cautious about. And we want to try to link that to our domestic reform program very carefully. So I think there is some homework, but given where we are, where we have to do many things together, it's not so bad. I'm less pessimistic, but I think we should be thinking more seriously if we want to be a player in the FTA game.
Thank you very much for being with us, Ganesh. And this is what basically a key message is, that we need to improve our institutional setup to negotiate better trade agreements, but not necessarily to shy away from them. Thank you very much for being with us, and stay tuned for another episode of Front Row.